The air inside the courthouse feels charged, as if the very walls are holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion of truth. Wooden benches groan under the collective weight of restless spectators shifting, whispering, anticipating. A static heaviness clings to the atmosphere, the smell of aged paper and burnt coffee, and the faint musk of cheap carpeting that has absorbed decades of secrets. If places could talk, this courtroom would scream. Beneath the harsh fluorescence, Kody Brown sits rigid at the defendant's table, jaw locked, golden curls falling across his eyes in a curtain he refuses to brush aside. He stares straight ahead, unwilling or unable to acknowledge the women seated before him. His fingers tap against the polished surface, each thud heavier than the last, as if signaling an approaching storm he knows he cannot outrun. Across from him sits Christine, stately in her stillness, regal in posture, but her eyes are a battlefield. Behind their hardened surface burns a deep well of betrayal, the rage of a woman silenced for decades who has finally arrived at the place where truth cannot be buried. Her presence alone is an indictment. Beside her, Janelle pushes her glasses higher on her nose, lips pressed shut so tightly the strain bleaches them pale. There is something inside her, something heavy, something long guarded, that trembles to surface. Mary sits a seat over, her expression a blank mask, but her hands betray her, fingers clamped so tightly to the arms of the chair her knuckles rise bone-white. And beyond Kody, Robin nervously dabs her eyes with a crumpled tissue, already trembling as though she knows something devastating is about to be dragged into the light. When the judge enters, her robe flowing like a shadow across the bench, the entire courtroom snaps into silence. The gavel's crack stabs through the air, slicing cleanly through murmurs and fidgeting. "This court is now in session," she announces, and instantly every head leans forward. Spectators, lawyers, even the once wives who once lived as a single family but now sit as estranged participants in a battle for truth. Christine's attorney rises with calm authority, his voice steady yet weighted. "Your Honor, what we bring before this court is no mere dispute of property or disagreement among family. What we bring you today is evidence of fraud. Evidence that Mr. Brown concealed a legally binding marriage, one he never disclosed to his wives, his children, or anyone standing before you." The room gasps collectively, the sound like air being sucked out of a collapsing structure. Kody flushes crimson, his jaw tightening as his attorney whispers frantically into his ear. But denial has nowhere left to hide. The attorney steps before the jury box, shoulders squared. "For years, my client felt something was wrong. Late-night disappearances. Sudden weekend trips without explanation. Half-truths that didn't add up. And now, after all this time, we have the confirmation. A marriage certificate. A legally certified document that Mr. Brown kept hidden." He lifts the paper, a crease-folded, slightly yellowed sheet, bearing the unmistakable seal of the county clerk. As it is passed to the judge, the courtroom holds its breath. Secrets of this magnitude do not slip quietly into the past. They detonate when they surface. Kody's attorney springs up, shouting that the document is a clerical mistake, ancient nonsense revived to humiliate his client. But his voice carries the pitch of desperation. His argument lands hollow. No one moves, no one breathes. Christine's attorney waits until silence settles again before facing his client. "Mrs. Brown, tell us what you suspected during the years leading to this discovery." Christine inhales deeply, shoulders rising under the weight of decades of suppressed doubt. When Kody returned home agitated, nervous, avoiding eye contact, she recalls finding a folder in his car the next. "I knew something was wrong," she says, her voice steady but trembling at the edges. "He would leave on weekends without telling us where he was going. He came back distracted, distant. I thought maybe it was stress or money troubles. But once I asked him where he'd been, and he looked at me and said, 'Don't ask questions you don't want answers to.'" Her words hit the courtroom like a stone through glass. Robin's head drops. Janelle blinks rapidly, and Mary sits frozen in her own silence. The judge studies the document, her brow furrowed as she traces the seal and signature. "This appears legitimate," she announces. Unless evidence is presented to prove otherwise, it will be admitted. Another slam of the gavel, another eruption of murmurs. Kody swears under his breath as Robin clutches his arm. Christine stays perfectly still, but in her eyes burns the quiet fire of vindication. Christine's attorney steps forward again. "Your Honor," he says lowly, "the truth does not end with this document. We have a witness. Someone who was there when this license was submitted." Kody's head snaps up, panic crackling through his eyes. His gaze sweeps the gallery, searching faces like a man looking for land in the middle of a flood. The bailiff calls the name. The doors groan open, and Janelle Brown steps forward. Gasps ripple. Kody jolts upright, disbelief painted across his features. Robin silently mouths, "No, please no." Christine exhales, closing her eyes for a moment as if releasing years of second-guessing. Janelle sits, lifts her chin, and speaks. "I saw enough to know that this document is real." Chaos erupts. Kody jumps up, shouting that she's lying, that she always hated him. Robin weeps. The judge's gavel slams repeatedly. Order is called, and slowly, painfully, the room settles again. Under questioning, Janelle describes a night from years earlier morning, papers bearing his name and another woman's. She remembers the sharp terror of realization. When she confronted him, he dismissed her, mocked her, and then threw the documents into a fireplace and set them ablaze. Her voice breaks, not with weakness, but with the pressure of memories she has tried for too long to swallow. Kody explodes again, pounding the table so hard pens fly to the floor. The judge threatens removal. Order is restored only by force. Kody's attorney tries to dismantle Janelle's testimony, arguing she has no physical proof. Janelle's response is simple, unwavering. "I don't need anyone to believe my memory. I need them to believe the truth." Her words resonate. Even the spectators sit in reverent silence. Then the next witness is called, the county clerk, Elaine Porter. She walks with the steady confidence of someone accustomed to dealing with bureaucracy's sharpest edges. When shown the document, she confirms it. The license is real, certified, and properly filed. And the signatures? Kody Brown and a woman named Celeste Harper. The name detonates through the room like thunder. Christine stiffens, stunned. Janelle's mouth falls open. Mary finally lifts her head. Robin folds in on herself. And Kody freezes, the color draining from his face. The truth is no longer a whisper, nor a suspicion. It stands in the center of the courtroom, undeniable, unforgiving, a living thing at last set free. The courtroom remained suspended in a stunned silence that felt almost unreal, as though time itself was holding its breath. Celeste Harper. The name continued echoing in the stale air like the final crack of a gavel no one was ready for. Even the judge, seasoned and steady, leaned back in her chair as if absorbing a blow. Kody sat rigid, his chest rising in uneven pulses, eyes darting from the clerk to the document to his wives, the women who had once believed him capable of anything except this. Christine's breath came shallow, her stare fixed on Kody, but it no longer held anger alone. It held understanding, the kind that hurts more than hatred ever could. Janelle shifted forward on the witness chair, hands clasped tight, the tremble in her fingers betraying the calm in her voice. Mary blinked rapidly, as if trying to read the truth again, and again within the seal stamped on that paper. And Robin, poor Robin, looked as though the floor had collapsed beneath her, but she had no strength left to fall. Christine's attorney, sensing the rawness of the moment, stepped forward slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal that might lash out. "Your Honor," she said softly, "the witness has confirmed authenticity. The court now has proof of a legally executed marriage between the defendant and a woman none of these wives were ever informed existed." Kody's attorney rose instantly, her voice firm but cracking around the edges. "Clerical mishandling, Your Honor. We need time to investigate. This cannot be taken at face value." But the judge was no longer listening to lawyers. Her attention was fixed on Kody, who still refused to look anyone in the eye. "Mr. Brown, She finally spoke, her voice low but resonant enough to stir the breathless room. You will answer the question posed earlier. Did you, or did you not, legally enter into marriage with one Celeste Harper while still bound in marital or spiritual union with these women? Kody swallowed hard. His shoulders slumped for the first time, an unfamiliar posture for a man who had always walked as if the world belonged to him. When he spoke, his voice was rough, the bravado stripped bare. I needed to protect things, he murmured, barely audible. Financial things. Business things. It wasn't. His attorney grabbed his arm, whispering urgently, but Kody shook her off. You all think you know what this was. You don't. Christine closed her eyes. Janelle looked away. Mary clutched her chest. And Robin, red-faced and trembling, whispered, How many lies were there? The judge's gavel struck sharply. Mr. Brown, this court requires truth, not riddles. Kody looked up then, finally meeting the eyes of the women he once called his entire world. His expression was no longer defiant, but haunted. It wasn't supposed to be real, he said. It was paperwork. A favor. A way to transfer assets. Someone needed a legal tie to me for a deal to move forward. It wasn't. Christine cut him off, standing abruptly. A favor? A legal marriage is not a favor. The judge immediately motioned her to sit, but the damage had already been done. Kody sank deeper into his chair, muttering, You think I wanted another wife? You think I wanted another mess? I was doing what needed to be done. I always did. The gallery murmured, shock, outrage, disbelief rippling through the packed room. Kody's attorney asked for a recess, but the judge denied it. This truth has waited long enough, she said. We proceed. Christine's lawyer stepped closer to the center of the room, her tone sharpening. Let's be clear. You married Celeste Harper not for love, not for faith, not for family. You married her for money. Kody flinched. For protection, he insisted. Everything I built was falling apart. I had to make moves none of you ever understood. His voice cracked at the end, revealing something raw beneath the rage. Christine stared at him long enough for the silence to become heavy. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, eerily calm. We didn't understand because you never let us. You decided everything in secret. You made choices that shaped our lives without ever treating us like partners. And now this? She gestured toward the document. A hidden marriage? For business? Her words didn't rise, didn't tremble. They simply existed like a knife, laid gently on a table. Janelle stood as well, despite the judge's attempts to maintain order. When you burn those papers, she said, her voice cracking for the first time, I thought maybe they were something embarrassing. Something stupid. But they were this, weren't they? They were Celeste. Kody closed his eyes. The truth was written plainly in the defeated slump of his shoulders. The judge signaled for both women to be seated, then turned her gaze back to Kody. Mr. Brown, the court now has reason to believe there may have been financial misrepresentation, marital misrepresentation, and potential intentional concealment of legally significant documents. You will answer every question from counsel truthfully from this point forward. Do you understand? Kody nodded wordlessly. Christine's attorney pressed forward. Where is Celeste Harper now? Kody exhaled sharply. Gone, he said. Moved. She's not part of this anymore. Convenient, the attorney replied. Did she receive money? Property? Land? Kody looked cornered, truly cornered for the first time. Some, he admitted. Temporarily. It was reversed. The attorney held up a folder. Our investigation shows otherwise. Gasps echoed again. Robin whispered, Please stop, but Christine didn't look at her. She couldn't. Not anymore. The truth had broken everything open, and there was no stitching it back together. The judge leaned forward. We will take a 15-minute recess to allow the court to regroup, she said, though her tone suggested she herself needed the air. But let me be absolutely clear. This matter is no longer about domestic disputes or family disagreements. It has crossed into potential legal wrongdoing. And this court will uncover every truth. Christine stood slowly, as if lifting herself from the ruins of something she never expected to face. Janelle wiped her eyes. Mary whispered a prayer, and Robin, trembling, reached for Kody's arm, only for him to flinch away. For the first time in all their years together, the wives realized something chilling. The man they thought they knew had built a life they were never truly part of. Kody Brown stood at the center of a courtroom vibrating with tension, the wooden walls absorbing the weight of decades of secrets that were finally being forced into the light, and every eye fixed on him saw a man unraveling in real time. Christine sat rigid in the front row, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap the knuckles had gone white, while Janelle, Mary, and Robin hovered beside her like the fractured constellation of a once unbreakable family, now cracked at every seam. The bailiff announced the judge's entrance, but even the gavel could not outpower the quiet storm suffocating the room. Kody shifted in his seat as Christine's attorney rose, her file thick with exhibits that promised devastation, and when she placed the single, aged, county-sealed document on the podium, the gallery collectively leaned forward like spectators at the edge of a cliff, waiting for one more stone to fall. "Mr. Brown," she said, holding the document high enough for the jurors to see, "do you recognize this?" Kody's jaw flexed, a ripple of panic breaking through the last remnants of his confidence as he whispered something to his attorney, who shook her head sharply. Christine stared forward, unmoving, as if she had already lived this moment in a dream and hated it then too. The attorney unfolded the paper, its creases deep, its ink still bold despite time, and the courtroom seemed to inhale all at once when she spoke again. "This is a legal marriage license filed in this county. The signatures belong to you, Kody James Brown, and to one Celeste Harper." It felt as though the oxygen had been sucked from the room. Robin's hand flew to her mouth. Janelle's eyes widened with the ghost of an old memory. Mary whispered something only she could hear, and Christine, exhaled slowly, a tear forming but refusing to fall. Kody's attorney objected, shouting about clerical errors and administrative anomalies, but the judge silenced her, demanding clarity from the defendant himself. Kody shifted forward, palms flat on the table, his voice cracking as he said, "It wasn't what you think. None of you know what I was dealing with." But the attorney pressed harder, revealing more pages, bank transfers, land deeds, tax filings, names tied to accounts none of the wives had ever been told existed, all pointing back to the same hidden figure, Celeste Harper. Janelle, trembling now, stood up despite the judge's warnings, blurting out a memory she'd buried for years, of finding papers in Kody's car, papers he burned in the fireplace while insisting she let it go, papers she now realized were the first traces of this secret marriage. Kody snapped, shouting that they were twisting everything, claiming he had married Celeste only for strategic financial protection, that it was never about love, never about betrayal. But the judge's face hardened as she reminded him that entering a marriage under false pretenses or hidden circumstances while already spiritually or legally bound to others was still a legally significant act. The county clerk was called in, confirming the marriage as authentic, recounting how Celeste had appeared anxious but determined on the day she filed the paperwork. Each revelation hit the courtroom like a blow. Money funneled through shadow accounts, property temporarily transferred then lost, assets shuffled under the guise of tax strategy, all orchestrated by a man who once preached unity and family. The wives sat like ghosts, women who had built a life on promises that now lay in shards at their feet. When asked where Celeste was now, Kody muttered that she had moved away, that she wasn't part of this anymore, but the attorney countered with documents showing financial traces linking him to her far more recently than he claimed. The gallery erupted again, whispers filling the air like sparks on dry wood. Kody, visibly unraveling, slammed his fist on the table, insisting he did everything for the good of the family, that he had been drowning in financial pressure none of them had understood. Christine finally stood, her voice deep and steady, telling him he had never asked them to understand, had never allowed them into the truth, had never trusted them as partners, and now, that lack of trust had destroyed everything they built. The judge declared that the case had shifted from a domestic dissolution into potential fraud, concealment, and marital misrepresentation, and she ordered full inquiry into every account, every signature, every date, every transfer. Robin sobbed openly, reaching for Kody, but he recoiled, unable to face the one wife who had believed him the longest. Janelle wept silently. Mary stared straight ahead, hollow. Christine stood unmoving, as if her spine were forged from every betrayal she had survived. As the gavel struck for recess, the courtroom burst into motion, but Kody remained frozen, staring at the marriage license with Celeste's name like it was the final indictment of the life he once pretended was righteous. And in that moment, tense, breathless, heavy with truths long buried, the wives understood the most painful revelation of all. The man they shared a life with had been living a life none of them ever shared. The courtroom erupted into a low, frantic hum the moment the judge's gavel struck for recess, but even with bodies moving and voices rising, there was a strange stillness around Kody as he remained seated at the defendant's table like a man who had suddenly realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid stone but thin, cracking ice, and each breath he took seemed to widen the fractures. Christine stood only a few feet away, yet it felt like miles, her eyes fixed on him with a mixture of heartbreak and disbelief so profound that even the bailiff glanced at her with the uncomfortable awareness that something bigger than a legal proceeding was unraveling in front of them. Janelle, still trembling from her testimony, walked toward Mary, who was clutching her purse as though it contained the last pieces of her dignity, and the two exchanged a quiet, painful silence that said more than any words could. Robin hovered behind Kody like a ghost tethered to the ruins, her hands twisting nervously against her chest as if she expected him to reach out, to comfort her, to assure her that everything was just another misunderstanding. But Kody didn't look at her. He couldn't. His gaze remained glued to the marriage certificate lying on the table, its county seal bright and accusing under the fluorescent lights. Reporters buzzed like hornets along the back rail, whispering into their phones, already crafting headlines. Secret marriage exposed, Brown family deception, courtroom chaos, and as spectators pressed in to catch fragments of conversation, the air thickened with the uncomfortable thrill of witnessing the downfall of a man who once commanded his home like an empire built on obedience and loyalty. When the judge finally retreated to chambers, the attorneys moved quickly. Christine's lawyer approached her client with the calm intensity of a surgeon who had just found the infection she'd been searching for, while Kody's attorney leaned over him, whispering in rapid, hushed bursts, trying to stitch together a strategy from threads that were already unraveling. But Kody barely heard her. His mind replayed the moment the clerk said the name Celeste Harper, a name he had buried so deliberately he had convinced himself the world would never unearth it. Christine stepped closer to him then, stopping only when the bailiff instinctively moved to block her path, but she lifted her hand gently, signaling she meant no confrontation, only clarity, and in a voice almost too soft to hear, she asked the only question she had left. "What else, Kody? What else did you hide?" The words sliced him open more sharply than if she had shouted them. His mouth parted, but no sound came. Robin's breath hitched, a small sob breaking free, as she clutched the back of Kody's chair, her knuckles white, whispering, "He didn't mean it. He didn't mean any of this." But even she sounded unsure, as if she were pleading with the universe rather than defending the man beside her. Janelle stepped forward next, her eyes glistening but fierce, fueled not by rage, but by the exhaustion of someone who had carried too many burdens for too long. "When you burned those papers," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers, "I defended you. I told myself it was something harmless, that maybe you were covering for someone else, that maybe it was old paperwork that meant nothing. But it wasn't nothing, was it? It was this. It was her." Kody shut his eyes as if the truth might disappear behind his eyelids, but when he opened them, the world remained exactly as shattered as before. Mary finally spoke too, little more than a whisper. The question fragile and devastating. Were we never enough? Her words hit Robin, who turned sharply toward Kody, eyes wide and wounded, as if she too was hearing for the first time that whatever she thought she shared with this man might have been nothing more than another carefully arranged illusion. Kody's voice finally scraped out, raw and uneven. It wasn't like that. You don't understand. I was trying to protect all of you. Christine let out a hollow laugh, one that didn't hold humor, only years of understanding suddenly clicking into place. Protect us, she repeated, her tone laced with quiet disbelief. By lying. By marrying someone else. By burning evidence in front of your own wife. That's not protection, Kody. That's fear. That's manipulation. That's you choosing control over partnership. Kody looked as if he might speak again, but his attorney firmly squeezed his shoulder, warning him to stay silent. The bailiff announced 5 minutes remaining in the recess, and a new tension pulsed through the room as people returned to their seats, eager not to miss whatever revelations were still waiting to surface. The judge's clerk re-entered with a stack of files, placing them on the bench, and even from across the room, Christine's attorney recognized the seal and exchanged a knowing look with her co-counsel. This wasn't over. In fact, it was likely just beginning. Robin hovered near Kody, tears streaking down her face as she whispered, "Tell them you didn't love her. Please, Kody. Tell them it wasn't real." But he didn't answer, only stared at the table with hollow eyes, and that silence, more than the documents, more than the testimonies, more than the secrets, was the final fracture that made something deep inside Robin finally collapse. She stepped back, her hand covering her mouth as she shook her head slowly, whispering to herself, "Oh God, you loved her," before turning away from him completely. Christine watched this unraveling with no triumph, no vindication, only the heavy sorrow of recognizing that the man who once promised them unity had been dividing them from the shadows for years. When the judge returned, the room fell still again, and as she took her seat, she studied Kody with a gaze that held both authority and disappointment.